Good morning, friends. Today, I, Dr. Davis Mandil, professor in Suresh Gyan Vihar University, I will discuss about relationship in DBMS. You know, DBMS is the database management system, and you know, DBMS objective is that present introduction of database management system with our emphasis on how to organize, maintain, and retrieve the database and efficiently use the database. And there are so many outcomes of your DVMS, like after completion of DBMS, student should be able to describe the functional elements of relational database management system and also explain the basic concept of relational data model, entity relationship model, relational model, primary key, super key, candidate key, etc. And student will able to how to design the ER model of enterprise and convert the ER model into relational table and populate relational database and formulate SQL query on data. And after study the subject, student will able to how to create the table, how to insert the data into your table, how to update the table, how to delete the table. Okay, there are so many outcomes of the subject, that is your database management system. And here I am discussing about relationship in your DBMS. Okay, I am presenting my screen. You know, relationship between the two entities. Okay, means your first entity is related from the another entity. Okay, and in this lecture, I will explain what is the relationship, how many types of your relationship, one to one relationship, one to many relationship, many to many relationship, and you many to one relationship. Okay, you know, relation relation is that I had told when your one entity is related from the another entity. That is your relation between the two entities. And entity, entity is the person place. Your entity have some characteristics. Your entity have some features called the attributes. Like your student is your entity, teacher is your entity, your table is your entity because student teacher, and table have some characteristics called the attributes. For example, suppose I am having the two entities, student and college. College is your entity and student is your entity. And the relationship between the student and your college is to study. Study is your relationship between the student and college. Okay, that's why I had told relation when your one entity is related from the another entity, that is your relation. And also you can say that we are related to thing around us in some or other way. We are related to our family, friends, etc. And these relationships are different kinds. For example, you and your father relation, you and your wife relation, you and your son relation, you and your daughter relation, you and your friend relation, and you and your siblings are related, you and your teacher are related. Okay, you and your college are related, you and your subject are related. The teacher teach as well as many other students. You also student from different teachers. And if we will talk about the database relationship, database relationship are also similar to the such relationship, like with the ER model. And we also know about the entity. As per I have told, entity is the person, place, and your entity having some characteristics called the attributes. Like your student have some characteristics like your student name, student father name, student mother name, student sister name, student teacher, student course, student area, student pin code, etc., etc. These are the all attributes of your particular entity. And now I am explaining the relationship in your DBMS. As per I had told, association between the two entity type is called the relationship. Means when your first entity is related from the another entity is called a relationship. Entities take part in the relationship. It is represented by a diamond. When you are presenting a one entity is related from the another entity. So that is your relationship between your first entity and your second entity. And your always your relationship described between entities from the diamond shape. Okay, like your, suppose we have two entity type of your customer. Customer is your entity, and your customer attributes are your customer ID, customer name, customer city, and your phone. And your second entity is your account. Account uh, account uh, is your entity, and your account number, account balance, and your account type. These are the all attributes of your account entity. And we store data of your customer in a one table, and his account details in your account tables. Means we have taken the two tables. One table is for customer table, customer, and second table is for account. And if I am taking the customer table, so there are so many attributes as per I had told, like your customer name, customer ID, customer city, and your phone number. These are the all attributes of your customer table. And as per I had told, your second table is your account table. And attributes of your account tables are your account number, your account type, and your account balance. And now link of these two tables, we need to insert the primary key. Means when you want to related both the tables, so we need to primary key. Primary key is one of the key, and through the primary key you can identify a particular tuple. You can identify the particular record. That is your primary key. Like your, suppose you are having a database of your teacher, and you want to identify the particular teacher. So if your teacher PIN card is one of the attribute of your teacher table, so through the teacher PIN card you can identify the particular employee. So means primary key is that through the identify a particular record, to the identify a particular tuple. That is your primary key. Okay. And this key fact as a foreign key for the account table, and refers to a column with the same name. Okay. And this is how a relationship between the two table is established. Means when you want to define the relationship between the two tables, and how to establish the relationship between the two tables, so there are three types of relationship that can be exist between the two entity. Your first type of your relationship is your one-to-one relationship, and second type is your one-to-many relationship, and your many-to-one relationship, and your many-to-many relationship. So basically, these are the all types of your relationship. First, I will explain the all types of your relationship one by one. First of all, I will discuss about your one-to-one relationship. From the name of this type of relationship, that is your one-to-one, means when your one entity is related from your another entity. Means when your one entity is related from the one entity, it's called the one-to-one relationship. And also you can say that this relationship exists when each record of one table is related from only one record of the other table. That is your one-to-one. Like your, suppose you are having a two table. Your first table is your, suppose, customer, and your second table is, suppose, for your account. So as per I had told, according to your one-to-one, when your each record of one table, means when your each record of your customer table is related to the only one record of your account table, so that is your one-to-one relationship. And we can understand one-to-one relationship through the diagram. Here I had taken two entity. First entity is your person, and second entity is your passport. You know, person is a entity and your passport is your entity. That's why, your entity is represent in your rectangle shape, and your relationship always represent in your diamond shape. So here is your person is your one entity, and passport is your another entity. Okay, and has is the relationship between the two entities. Two entities means between the person and your passport, and that is your one-to-one relationship. Because every person have only one passport. That's why you can say that your this relationship is your one-to-one relationship. And as per I had told, your has is your relationship between your two entities. These are your person and your passport. So this is the one of the example of your one-to-one mapping. And you can take the another example of your one-to-one mapping, like your first entity is your person and your second entity is your Aadhaar card. Obviously, this relation is the one-to-one relationship because each person will keep the only one Aadhaar card number. Okay, so that is the second another example of your one-to-one mapping. And you know, if there are two entities like your person and your passport, and person's attributes are your person ID, person name, person age, and your person address, and the second entity is your passport, like your passport ID and passport number are the attributes of your passport entity. So each person can have only one passport, and your each passport belong to the one person. That is the example of your one-to-one relationship. Such type of relationship is very common, and such a relationship is used for security purpose. And in this given example, we can easily store the passport ID in the person table only, but we make another table for the passport because passport number may be sensitive data and it should be hidden from every certain users. So by making a separate table, we provide extra security that only certain database users can see it. So that is the one example of your one-to-one mapping, where I have told I have taken the two entity. First entity is your person, and second entity is your passport. And the person entity having some attributes like your person ID, person name, person address, etc., etc. And your passport is the second and another entity, and your this passport entity having some attributes like your passport number, pass and etc., etc. Okay, and the relationship exists between the person and your passport one to one. Okay, and also you can take the another example of your one to one entity. And second type of your relationship is that one to many and many to one relationship. When I am talking about the one to many, you can understand from this type of your relationship, that is your one to many, means when your one entity is related from the another many entities, is called the one to many. Okay, and as the name implies, many to one means when your many will related from the one, is called the many to one relationship. When each record of your one table can be related to one or more than one record of the other table, this relationship is the most common relationship found. And one to many relationship can also be said as a many to one relationship depending upon the way. Okay, and you can understand through this diagram. In this diagram, I have taken two entities, and also you can say that I have taken the two tables. First is your customer, and second is your account. Okay, and you know one customer can keep the more than one account, like that. Suppose me, I am having the many accounts. Okay, so that is your one to many relationship. And in this diagram, you can see your entities are represent in your rectangle, and your relationship is represent in your diamond. That is, has is the relationship between customer and account. And here I have mentioned your one before the uh, relationship has, and your n after the relationship, that is your has. So means your one customer having more than one account. So that is the example of your one to one, sorry, one to many relationship. Okay, and you know this type of relationship exists when your each record of your one table can be related to one or more than one record of the other table. This relationship is one of the most common relationship found. As per I have taken example, here I have taken the two entity type, your customer type and your account type. And your customer, eh, as per I had told, your customer can have more than one account, but each account held by only one customer. Okay, and in this example I have mentioned customer is associated with many account, and it is the one to many relationship. But if we see it the another way, that is many account is associated with one. Many account is associated with one customer, then we can say that it is a many to one relationship. Okay, so that is the example of your many to one relationship. And next relationship is that many to many relationship. Many to many, from the name implies, when your many is related from the many of your other table, that is your many to many relationship. This type of relationship exists when your each record of your first table can be related to one or more than one record of your second table, and a single record of the second table can be related to one or more than one record of the first table. That is your many to many relationship. Many to many relationship can be seen as a two one to many relationship, which is linked by a linking table or associate table. Linking table links two tables by having fields which are the primary key of the other two tables. Here your primary key word used. So now I am explaining the primary key. What is the primary key? You know, primary key is the column, or you can say that collection of your more than one columns. And through the primary key, you can identify a particular record. You can identify a particular tuple. That is your primary key. I had explained many times example of your primary key. Suppose you are having a student database, and you are having many tables in this database of your student, like your student table, your teacher table, etc., etc. In your student table, one of the attribute is the student id, one of the attribute is the student registration number, student enroll registration number, and in your teacher table, your teacher pin card is the one of the attribute of teacher table. Okay, so in the student table, you can make the student id as your primary key, because your student id is your unique. Through the student id, you can identify a particular student. So your student id is the primary key. And when I will talk about the teacher table, where your teacher pin card is one of the column of your teacher table. So you can make the teacher pin card as your primary key, because teacher pin card is unique, and through the teacher pin card you can identify a particular teacher. Okay, so that is your primary key. And now I am taking the example of your primary of your many to many relationship. Here I am having two entity. First entity is your customer, that is represent in your rectangular box, and your second entity is your product, that is also represent in your rectangular box. And here I have defined m before the relationship, and n after the relationship, that is your y, buys. Okay, you know, that is your many to many relationship. Okay, and as per I had told, here is two tables, two entity types, your customer and your product, and your customer can buy more than one product. Obviously, your customer buy the more than one product can be bought by many different customers. Okay, as per I had mentioned your image, your customer is your one entity type, and product is the other entity type. Okay, and now to understand this concept of the linking table, here we can have the order entity as your linking table, which link the customer and your product entity. We can break the many to many relationship into one to many relationship. First, your each customer can have many order, whereas your each order is related to only one customer. Second, order is related only one product, and whereas there are many orders from the same product. That is the example of your many to many relationship. And you can take the other examples of your one to many, where you can take the two entity type. First is your customer entity type, and second is your order entity type, and that is your one to many relationship between your customer to order. Because your one customer can place the more than one order. Your customer makes the more than one order. So that is your one to many relationship. Now you can take the other examples, like where you can take the two entity type. First is your order and second is your product. And relationship between these two entity types is the for. Obviously, this is the relationship between your order and your product, and where relation is the for between two entity type, order and your product. And now suppose you are having the three tables: customer, order and your product. And your customer attributes are customer ID, customer name, customer age, and your customer mobile number. And your order attributes are: order is your table, another table, and the attributes of your order tables are order ID, customer ID, and your product ID. And your product is the another table, and the attributes of your product tables are product ID, product name, price, mobile number, and your date. Okay. So in this given concept of your linking can be understood with the help of taking into consideration all the attributes of the entity customer, order, and your product. And we can see that the primary key of both customer and your product entity are included in the linking table. In your customer table, maybe your customer ID is your primary key, because your customer ID is unique, and through the customer ID you can identify to customer. And when I am talking about the order table, and as per I had told, there are so many attributes, there are so many columns of your order table, like your order ID, your customer ID, sorry, your order ID and your product ID, etc, etc. And your product table attributes are product ID, product name, price, and mobile number, and your date. Okay. So we can see that the primary key of your both customer and your product entity are included in the linking table, that is the order table. And these key act as a foreign key while when you are referring to the respective table from the order table. And now, after discussed about the types of relationship, I am I will discuss about participation constraints. Okay, you know, relationship can be between two strong entity, or a strong entity and a weak entity. You know about the weak entity. I hope weak entity, where your one entity is depend on your another entity, is called the weak entity. If your one entity is depend on the another entity, is called the weak entity. Okay. And depending upon the type of entity participating in the relationship, and this participation can be partial and total. And how many types of your participation? Two types of your participation. First is your partially, and the second is your total. First is your partial participation, and second is your total participation. Partial participation exists when all the entity of an entity type is not associated with one or the other entity of another entity type. This is represented by joining the relationship with the entity type with the help of one line. This is your partial participation. Again, I am explaining about the participation. Your partial participation exists when all the entity of your entity type is not associated with one or the other entity of your another entity type. This is your partial participation. And in this example, your customer is your one entity, and your order is your another entity, and the relationship between two entities is your one too many. So that is your participial participation according to your definition of your partial participation. And second is that total participation. Total participation exists when all the entity of an entity type is associated with one or other entity is another entity type. And you can also say that that is the reverse of your partial participation. This is representation by joining the relationship with the entity type with the help of your double parallel line. And such a relationship usually exists between a strong entity and your weak entity. Okay, I had already told about the weak entity, and now I am taking the example of your total participation. In this given image, your hedge is your relationship between the employee and your department, and the relationship exists between the employee and department is your one to many. So here is your one is your participle participation, and n is your total participation. And also you can see hedge, which is your relationship between your employee and your department, is represented in into your double diamond. So that is the example of your participation, partial participation. Okay. And you know, we have two entity type in this partial participation, employee and your department. And all the all the, sorry, one of the employee and second is your dependent. And then all the dependent entity are related to one or the other employee entity. This is called the total participation of the entity in the relationship. But it may be possible that some employee are not related to any of the dependent entity. So employee is the showing partial participation, whereas the dependent in showing total the participation in your relationship. You can see in this given diagram. Okay. And After discussed what is a relationship, how many types of your relationship, and what is one-to-one relationship, what is your one-to-many relationship, what is your many-to-one, what is your many-to-many relationship. Means after studying this lecture, student will able to giving the answer of these questions. Okay, like your what is the relationship, types of relationship, one to one relationship, one to many relationship, many to one, and your many to many, and how many types of your participation. Okay, and also a student will able to these answer which are related to your this lecture, like your when you are making a EI diagram of your enterprise, an EI diagram rectangle with rounded corners represent like your entity class, weak entity, relationship, and your attribute. And also a student can give the answer after studies this lecture in an EI diagram. A ellipse represent means when you are making a ER diagram and you want to represent the attributes of a particular entity, like your suppose your student is the entity, and attributes are the characteristics of your entity. And suppose your student entities characteristics are student ID, student roll number, student subject, student college, etc., etc. And your question is that in your ER diagram, your ellipse represents. So after study this lecture, a student can give the answer of this question that how to represent attribute in which shape, and also you can say that in your ER diagram, ellipse represents. Obviously, your ellipse represent the attribute. Okay, and according to this question, in an ER diagram, ellipse represent the weak entity, relationship, attribute, and your entity classes. So obviously, your attribute is a represent in your uh, ellipse. Okay, and also student will able to give the answer of some questions like your in an ER diagram, the relationship is represented by. In this given lecture, you can see in many times how to represent the relationship between the two entity, and then your student will able to after studying this lecture कि your relationship is represented by the ellipse or rectangle with rounded corners and your diamond. Okay, so student will able to give the answer after study this question, and student will also able to give the answer of some questions like your attribute which consists of a group of attribute is called. attribute which consists of a group of attribute is called, like your composite attributes, multi-valued attributes, and composite identifiers and your identifiers. If a student has studied about this lecture, obviously your student can give the answer. And your another question is that identify that concept of two or more attributes are called composite attribute, multi-valued attribute, identifier, and your composite attributes. Student will able to after study this lecture can give the answer. And another questions which refer to connecting entities of different types when identifiers are different. Has a relationship is a relationship, binary relationship, and your none. Obviously, student can give answer after study this lecture. Relationship among entities of a single class are called. Is a as your answers are is a relationship, recursive relationship, has a relationship, and your none. And another student will able to give the answer of another questions like your which is not included in the definition of an entity, person, object, concept, and your action. You know, entity entity is your real world things, your person or your place, and your entity having the characteristics called the attributes. And obviously student can give the answer after studying this lecture. And another question is that which is not is the example of your strong entity type, like your course, department, student id, and your student. Okay, so I had told many times your weak entity. When we will talk about the weak entity, your weak entity is the entity that it depend on your another entity is called the weak entity. And another questions are, if employee is the entity type, then Michael Smith is the entity characteristics field identifier and your instances. Okay, so your record is the collection of your columns. And another question is that a meaningful association between entity types is relationship type, entity identifier, relationship stance, and your associative entity. And also student can give the answer is your entity type whose extension depends on another entity type is called strong entity, weak entity, dependent entity, and dependent and your variant. I mean to say that your student will able to give the answer which are related to your entity relationship model and your types of your relationship model. Okay, in this lecture I have discussed so many topics like your relationship types of your relationship, like your one to one, one to many, many to one, and your many to many. And also I had discussed about the types of your partial participation. Okay, I hope you have understood the concept of your relationship. Thank you.